The series begins in the hospital, and he is in a condition with a serious injury and needs surgical intervention, and after that we see everyone as they ask him to doctor Atef, and at the same time Atef comes and performs the operation for the patient with ease, and all the doctors and staff turn off and insult him about his achievement. Dr. Atef's phone rings, and he discovers that he forgot the phone in the patient's stomach and enter imprisonment and death sentence. After that, Atef wakes up, and we discover that it was a dream, and his father enters him, and Atef is convulsed, so he asks him when will Ibn Sina arrive. Magdi Yaqub wake up, so Atef is surprised by his question, and he replies to him and says it is 7 o'clock, and Atef's father is annoyed that Atef woke up late and asks him to go and see his job location, so he annoys Atef because he is still it's early, but Atef gets scared when he finds his father anger. Then his father gives him money, so Atef thanks him and tells him that it is the last time he will take his money from him because he will work and he will have money with him. His mother, Atef, appears and reassures him that he will be a famous doctor, and pretends that the place of the job will be close to his house. The doorbell rings, so their neighbor asks him to give him an injection, but Atef refuses and tells him that he is a doctor, not a nurse's assistant, so his father gets angry and walks away. Not a nurse's assistant, so his father gets angry and walks away. We go back in time, and we see Atef as a child, and he wants to wear Superman, but his father brings him a doctor's clothes, and we see Atef on his birthday, while he is waiting for his father's gift, and he is shocked that his father brought him a microscope and let him go. All this because his dream is that his son becomes a doctor, and then we see Atef growing up and graduating from medical school. And Atef goes to meet his friend, and they go to the work distribution office, and his friend's generosity appears, and he gets annoyed because Atef woke him up early, so Atef tells him that his father is in a hurry to get the job, and Atef asks him about Ibn Sina's wake-up time, and he will be his friend. They finished their studies and graduated from the university, and Atef hopes that his place of work will be close to the vicinity of his house, so his friend reassures him and tells him that they will surely work in a place close to the perimeter of the house. When he arrives, Atef stands in a long line and waits for his turn, and he is happy because all those who came before him go to nearby places. When Atef's turn comes, he is shocked when he knows where he is assigned, and the employee tells him that his place of work is in a health unit in a far village called Tarshuk al-Leaf. Atef remains unable to pronounce the name of the village and asks from the employee to leave his work in a nearby place, and he does not agree to go to the village, so the employee becomes angry and asks him to go. And then Atef goes with Karam to play PlayStation, so Atef gets angry with Karam because of his calmness, and tells him that they went to work in very far places, and we know that his friend will work in southern Sudan outside Egypt, so his friend tells him that he will file a grievance because his father is dead and he will move to a nearby place, and Atef tells him that his father is alive, so Karam responds and he says you can make a grievance, so Atef tells him that his father is alive, so he says that it is generosity, because you do not have sisters, you can make a grievance, and it is just a paper that the employee extracts easily, and then you will go to a nearby workplace. The next day, Atef goes to the ministry to obtain the certificate, and when he enters the office, he meets the female employee, so I ask him to go to another employee because it is not her specialty. From the vicinity of his house, Atef is forced to go. Then we see him riding the train, and he asks a seller about the location of the splattered fiber, and with Atef's humiliation, he rides and transports a lot until he arrives at the health unit. After that, Atef meets Professor Abdul Badi, and Abdul Badi thinks that Atef is sick, and asks him to pay the price of the examination. And Abdul Badi takes him to Ashraf, the director of the health unit, and then Ashraf asks Abdul Badi to turn on the fan, and Dr. Ashraf receives drive Atef and asks him what would you like to drink? And Ashraf tells him that you have become one of the work team, and Atef is surprised by his way and says that he needs to sign it on the grievance paper in order to move to another place near his house, so Dr. Ashraf gets upset and tells him that you are the 9th person to come here and ask for a transfer, and he gets angry with him and tells him that there is no doctor who likes to work in the regions and everyone wants to go to Cairo and Alexandria, and Ali Atef shows that he is not interested, and the doctor agrees to the transfer request, but on the condition that Atef signs the job acceptance papers first, and then goes on the grievance papers, and then drive. Ashraf goes to pray. Then Ashraf tells him that he was deceiving him in order to pass the job acceptance papers and that he wants to stay, so Atef gets angry and reveals that Dr. Ashraf was joking with him. At the same time, Miss Kauthar, the director of nursing, enters the place and asks Drive Ashraf to sign a piece of paper, so Drive Ashraf introduces her to Atef, the new doctor. Atef goes to say hello to Miss Kauthar, and suddenly the chandelier that was in the ceiling fan falls, drive. Ashraf turns and says if it fell on his head. If someone died while he was talking, the ceiling fan would fall on him immediately and kill him. Atef Kauthar asks who will send him the transfer paper now. Kauthar gets angry at him, telling him that you cannot transfer now because you have become the director of the health unit now instead of doctor Ashraf, who died, to catch up with him, but he succeeds in escaping from them and riding many connections until he returns to Cairo. Atef returns to his house in Cairo, and when his son asks him about what happened in his day, Atef evades the question and enters his room. Then he calls his friend Karam, but he does not answer. Then Atef goes to sit with his parents, so Atef is terrified when his father asks him to turn on the fan, and Atef tells him that it is cold, so his father is surprised from his words, and during their conversation, the doorbell rings, and when Atef opens the door, he gets shocked when he sees the police looking for him, so they take him to the police station. There in the police there is a director from the Ministry of Health, and a police officer also enters, so Atef is terrified, and the officer is surprised by Atef's clothes because he is wearing home clothes. And that the fan fell by itself, without the intervention of anyone. From the college soon, the principal speaks and says that what happened is estimated, but it is on the official paper, so you are a director and you have to take over your work. So Atef speaks and says that he cannot leave Cairo and go to a village and that he rides 35 buses to go to work, and thus I cannot see my parents for 2 years, so the officer becomes angry with Atef. He tells him that he has cases that are more important than his case, and threatens him that if he does not go to work, I will imprison you. So Atef gets scared and asks the officer what is required. The desk. When Atef gets out of prison, he meets his friend Karam, and his friend Karam tries to find a solution to the problem, so Atef thinks of escaping, but Karam does not encourage him to the idea. Then Karam finds a solution to the problem and tells him that he can work inside the health unit for a period of 6 months, after which he submits a request for transfer, but on the condition that he takes more than 6 days, that is, he does not deduct from his salary. So Atef is annoyed by the long period, but Karam tries to console Atef and tells him that 6 months is lighter and easier than 2 years. He also jokes with him and tells him that rural girls are more beautiful than Cairo girls. He is known by girls from Cairo so that I know girls from the countryside, and he is asked to shut up. In the morning of the next day, Atef returns to the health unit, and as soon as he enters the place, he meets Mr. Abdul Bedi. Atef is shocked when he learns that his salary has been deducted for 5 days because of his escape from work. Atef goes to Miss Kauthar and she takes him to his office. Atef, why hasn't the burial taken place yet? So Miss Kauthar replies that permission should have been taken from the new director of the unit, and that was not done because of his escape. Atef asks about the family of the deceased to receive the body. Miss Kauthar replies, saying that they are dead. Then we see Drive, Samir, and also Alfat, a nurse, Drive. Samir, who specializes in dentistry in the health unit. Alfat asks Drive, Samir, do we charge the patients for the examination, or do we not do that until we ask permission from the new doctor, and we know that Dr. Samir takes extra money from the patients more than the price of the examination ticket? Drive. Samir replies to Alfat and says that Atef is poor and he can do nothing. And we go back to Alice Atef, and he asks Miss Kauthar for another room because he is afraid of the room because of the death of Dr. Ashraf. So Kauthar replies that he is not there, and then Kauthar tells him about his duties in the unit, and Atef gets worried because he is responsible for everything in the health unit. The sons of Cairo joked, but Atef did not care about her talk and sleep. Then we see the nurse Alfat taking extra money from the patients and bringing them to Dr. Samir, and then we see Drive. Samir putting white manicure on the patient's teeth and explaining to her that he is doing teeth whitening, and then he asks her not to eat, drink or brush her teeth. Atef sits in his office, and a person enters him, and Atef thinks he is sick, but Miss Helmaya, the nurse, tells him that he is an employee in the unit. So the employee asks Atef for a day off, and Atef agrees and gives him a week off. Then a lady enters his office and tells him that her father has been ill since he ate beans, so Atef reveals to her eldest son, and Atef is shocked when he learns from the lady that the 2-week-old baby is the one who ate beans and got tired. Miss Kauthar goes to a job interview and asks Abdul Bedi to maintain the unit in her absence and take care of Dr. Atef because she is worried about him. After Kauthar goes, Abdul Bedi goes to pray. After that, we see Drive. Atef, and the nurse, Reda, enters and asks him to sign the vacation request. Atef agrees immediately, so Helmaya is surprised and says that he is supposed to. If you ask about the reason for the leave, as it may not be necessary, then Atef says that he does not like curiosity, and he says that she is definitely an extra nurse than the work staff, so Helmaya tells him that Maze accepted the nurse in the lobby room, so Atef is surprised that there is a whole room for the lobby. Then drive. Hagar, the doctor in charge of the pharmacy, appears, and she is arguing with a patient because he wants to take this medicine that is not available in his prescription. At that time, drive. Samir enters, and it appears that he likes drive. Hajar, but Hajar does not feel the same way. Doctor. Samir asks her about his decision to marry her, but she tells him she is busy now completing her studies in the field of marriage, so Samir gets angry and tells her that she is 25 years old, so she has become old. When she gets married, Hajar annoys him and tells him to leave me alone, but drive. Samir gets annoyed and leaves her. Then we go to Miss Reda, and she tells her colleagues at work that the new manager gives vacations to any employee, and then all the employees go and ask for vacations. Atef agrees, and Abdelbadi is shocked when he returns and discovers that the entire unit is empty, so he asks Atef what happened, and Atef says that I give leave to the employees and he is playing and not interested. Abdelbadi's rebuke and tells him that the law stipulates that only a quarter of the employees take leave, so Atef fears that they will take another leave and deduct from his salary. During their conversation, he hears his master's voice screaming. They discover that she is a woman who wants to give birth. Abdelbadi asks Drive, Atef to deliver her, and Atef replies that it is not his specialty. Abdelbadi says he must help her in childbirth so that they will not be punished. Atef takes her to the delivery room and asks Abdelbadi for hot water. At the same time, Drive. Hagar enters to take the baby and cut the umbilical cord, so Atef tells her that she is late, and thinks that she is a gynecologist, so Hagar replies and says that she is the pharmacist. If I give all the employees a leave, Atef is surprised how the department manager knew, so Abdelbadi cools down and says it is possible for someone from the sick or from the staff to inform him, so Atef gets frustrated because he took 6 days off in a deduction, and if he took a day more, he will remain in the unit for 2 years and cannot transfer. He constantly has to follow up on the employees and follow up on their work and work seriously, but Atef was not interested in his words and says the most important thing is not to take a penalty for another day, so Abdul Badi is frustrated and asks him to rest because they have another evening work period. In his own room alone, he will only go to the emergency room. Atef is shocked when he sees the room, so he asks him about the room's furniture, so he tells him that it has been stolen. When Atef opens another door in the room, Abdul Badi warns him, so Atef asks him about the reason, so Abdul Badi says that Dr. Ashraf was warning about it because when he opened it, a big problem happened to Dr. Ashraf, so Atef got scared, and then Atef asked who Abdul Badi wants to go to his house, but Abdul Badi refuses to go before he brings him food, and Abdul Badi beckons and tells him that he will make him a pizza. When Atef eats the pizza, he finds it dry and hard on his teeth, so he throws it from the window. At night, Atef goes to the unit and notices the nurses sitting, so he asks them where to buy food, so one of the nurses offers him and tells him that she can buy him a meal for 65 pounds. After Atef finishes his meal, he notices Drive. Ashraf's picture on the wall, throws it on the floor, and puts a piece of paper in its place to calculate the number of days he will sit in the health unit. The next morning, Atef wakes up terrified because he finds a patient next to him on his bed, so Atef asks why he went to his room, so the patient tells him that he is too late for his work appointment, so Atef yells at him and begs him to go. One of the nurses was surprised, but they went back to finish eating, and Maze Helmaya told him that she thought he was Miss Kauthar, who was inside the office, and Atef told them that he agreed that they eat breakfast in his office but on the condition that he eats breakfast with them. They make food for them, so Atef discovers that the nurse has set him up and sold him the unit's food, and Atef is supposed to get it for free. Then Atef tries to pass by the health unit, and then he gets bored, so he decides to go to the pharmacy at that time. Dr. Allah, colleague of Dr. Hagar, is in the pharmacy, and then Drive. Hagar appears and Atef apologizes to her about what happened yesterday, and she forgives him. Atef asks him about a life story, and he tells her. Dr. Samir appears, and he witnesses Atef and Hajar laughing together. He gets very upset and goes away. Then we see Miss Kauthar yelling at Miss Kauthar about her makeup and asking her to wipe it off. Atef goes to the dental clinic and asks her to see the clinic statements, so Olaf is surprised and brings him to Dr. Summaries and tells him about Atef's words, so he asks, "If you want to go out," then Atef grows up to sit on the chair. Atef is surprised and asks Samir what to do. Samir tells him to stay away from the dental clinic and Dr. Hajar, or she will humiliate him. Atef leaves, broken and upset, and leaves the unit and goes out. Atef is walking around the town and gets frustrated, and he finds someone sitting under the tree. His name is Muhammad, so he grabs Atef next to him and tells him what drive Samir did to him, and he keeps on talking. Atef with him, and then he asks him what is the relationship between Samir and Atef, or she thinks she is his fiancé. Then Atef thanks him and Atef tells him that he is happy to talk to him, but the men in fact do not answer him, and Atef goes back to the unit. At the same time, Allah talks to Dr. Hajar, and asks him about the conversation that took place between her and Atef, so she tells him that a good person was insulting her, so Allah suspects that she is in love with Atef. And then, as the days pass, Atef stands in front of his paper hanging on the wall, and writes off Atef the days he spent inside the unit. So Atef looks at the room that Abdul Badi followed him from, and Atef stands and wanted to open it, but before that, he opens it with the pawn of the sighting bell. So Atef goes to the unit and meets Abdul Badi and tells him that the unit is burning, so Atef runs and Abdul Badi tells him that the house next to the unit will burn if it is not controlled, the unit will burn. Atef thinks and says that we will let the unit burn, and then I will return to Cairo. Abdul Badia is surprised by his words, and says that my past is in charge of the place and that a big problem will happen if something happens to the unit. So Atef goes to the place of the fire, and when he arrives, he meets the owner of the house, so Atef is surprised when he finds many people who agree with him, and no one turns off the cayenne, so Atef talks to the owner of the house and tells him to call the firefighter. Someone other than the people of the house extinguishes the fire, and if someone else extinguishes the fire other than the people of the house, it will remain a stigma for the family. Atef is surprised and says that the whole village is burning like this. After that, Atef goes to the unit to examine the patients, so he asks his two dreams to enter the patients in order, so he enters the first patient, and Atef tells the patient that he is sick and asks for tests, so the patient tells Atef that he will come to him in a short time if he does not recover. Then Atef tells him that he is sick with gout, and he takes time to recover, so he says the disease and he comes to you in the evening, so Atef pours on him and tells him not to come in the morning, the loneliness will be terrified, and after Atef examines the patients, he wants to go back to the fire, so Helmia refuses and tells him that there is a patient outside, and she asks him to sign Miss Kawthar's paper, so the sick Helmia enters and she is old, and Atef is shocked when he knows that she is pregnant in the 4th month. Then we see Atef going over a piece of paper and stamping it, leaving the seal outside the drawer and walking away, and we see drive Samir standing in front of Atef's office and seeing the seal because the office door is open, so he decides to steal the seal on the desk, so Atef goes and talks to Dr. Samir tries to talk to Hajar, but she leaves him and goes to Atef. At the same time, Abdul Badi comes and tells Atef that the fire is still on, so drive Hajar suggests that they extinguish it with the fire extinguishers of the unit. Money from Abdul Badi, so Abdul Badi insults him and asks him to leave Atef, but Al-Harami refuses, and Atef asks Abdul Badi to give him money, but he does not have money with him. Abdul Badi's photo and he will be reported to the police, so Abdul Badi's guide him, and we know that this thief is the son of Abdul Badi's and his name is Ramadan. Atef is surprised and says he looks like a drug addict and he must be treated. He was crying, and at that time, Miss Kawthar entered them and became suspicious of them, so Atef was confused and tried to explain to her, so she left them and left. At the same time, we go to Dr. Samir, and he stamps some blank papers with Atef's seal, and then he asks Alfat to put the stamp in its old place in Atef's room without anyone seeing it. When Alfat goes to the room, she discovers that it is closed, and Miss Kawthar appears behind her, and asks her what to do, so Alfat replies that she was searching on the authority of Miss Helmea. Olft is confused when Miss Kawthar asks her about what is in her hands, and she was going to confess until Miss Kawthar speaks and asks her about the manicure that is on her nails and that it is forbidden and must be wiped. When Atef returns to the fire, it is still burning, and Atef hears the owner of the house asking for Marzouk, so he asks Abdul Badi who is Marzouk, so he tells him that he is the person who will extinguish the fire, but Atef is not convinced, and says this is ignorance, so Atef hears people talking about him, and we know that the people of the village see him as a man who fulfills wishes in Basel Marzouk, and indeed, as soon as he raises his stick towards the house, the fire is extinguished with ease, and Atef is amazed and does not believe, and the rest of the people are happy with what happened. Alfat returns to Dr. Samir, telling him what happened, but Samir gets angry and shouts at her, telling her that their plan may fail, so she reassures him that no one will see her. Atef goes to Hagar, telling her what happened, and that he did not believe what happened in the fire. Hagar advises him that he should not focus with the villagers, and that she has been in the village for 2 years, and she was surprised by everything, too, until she got used to it. On a chair, so he gets surprised and takes it and goes. The next morning, Atef calls his father and is surprised that he is waking up late, so Atef tells him that he is calling him because he needs money, so his father asks him about his salary, and Atef tells him that he did not receive the month's salary because he has not completed a month, and his son tells him that he will send him money. So Abdul-Badi calls me and asks him to go on a trip together. Atef meets Abdul-Badi, and they talk about Marzouk, and Abdul-Badi tells him that he reveals the unseen and also heals the sick, and people from neighboring countries come to him to heal them, but Atef is not convinced and sees that he is a fraud and a fraud. Indeed, patients are cured by him, so Abdul-Badi tells that his son Ramadan, when he was young, was very sick, and they took him to more than one doctor, but it was useless, so he took him to Marzouk, so he gave him something to drink, and after that the boy became fine. And then Abdul-Badi takes Atef to a wedding in the village, but Atef is surprised when Marzouk is present at the wedding, and suddenly someone comes to take Atef to eat, and Atef is shocked when he quickly takes him out. Rather, he eats and tells him when it is over, and then Abdul-Badi asks Atef to give him money as a gift from Atef to the groom, but Atef says that he has only 10 pounds, and this is a very small amount because his son Ramadan stole Atef, but Abdul-Badi insists on that and says that no one will see you because most of the happy people did this, and Atef hears his words and goes to give the groom the money. He is surprised when he finds the person who takes the money and exposes him on the microphone and says his name and says that he paid 10 pounds. Al-Badi is on him, and then Atef asks him to return to the health unit, and at the same time a person from those present in the joy falls on the ground, and Atef goes to check on him, and while Atef examines the patient, Marzouk comes and succeeds in recovering the patient with ease, but Atef is shocked by what he saw and does not speak. The next day, Atef goes to buy food, so he meets Drive Samir, and Atef tries to stop him and talk to him about what he did, but Samir does not answer him and leaves him and goes, and Atef returns to the health unit. Sahelmaya asks him about what is bothering him, so Atef replies that he is tired of this village because it has strange things that are difficult to understand, so she offers him his dream is to make him a cup of cinnamon, so Atef gets angry and asks her to go. After that, we go to Dr. Hajar, and she is standing with Miss Kauthar, and she is preparing for me the educational symposium that will be held in the health unit. At the same time, Atef reveals to a child who suffers from an allergy to bananas, and tells his father that she warned her that her son eats bananas, and that she gives him a very small piece if he is determined to eat bananas. The police. Hajar goes to Atef and asks him to attend the educational seminar and give a sermon, but Atef refuses and says that he has not attended the sermon, so Hagar says that he must attend the seminar or he will be suspended from his work, so Atef is afraid and has to agree. A scientific topic, so Atef decides to talk about Marzouk, so everyone in the symposium is shocked, and Atef continues and says that what is happening is ignorance and superstition, and that they do not believe anything but science, and that Marzouk harms them and their children. To the head of the administration, Atef is afraid and asks him not to talk about him. To the head of the administration, Hajar goes to congratulate Atef and tells him that she is happy with him because she did not talk about the imposter issue and he decided to educate people. At night, Atef goes out in front of the unit to talk to his friend Karam, and tells him about the village and tells him that its people are good. At the same time, a car stops in front of Atef and kidnaps him. Atef discovers that the one who kidnapped him is Marzouk because of his talk about him in the seminar. He talks to Marzouk and tells Atef that he knows what he said about him in the seminar. And I said about me that I am a fraud and a fraud, so Atef denies it and says that the one who spoke is Dr. Hajar. Then Atef comes back in his words and tells him that he had to talk about him because he did not find a topic to talk about in the symposium, and Atef lies and tells Marzouk that he spoke about him well and that he did not make a mistake about him, But Marzouk will not believe him, and then he asks one of his men to untie the rope that Atef is tied to. Then Atef apologizes to him and asks him to go, but Marzouk asks Atef to have tea with him, but it appears that Marzouk put an anesthetic in the tea that Atef is drinking. And he asks him to drive him to the health unit when he arrives, so he thanks the donkey for the ride. When Atef enters the unit, he finds a waiting person, and he wants the doctor because his father is injured at home, and he wants the doctor to examine him, so Atef asks him to show up so he can change his clothes and go with him. And they say that Atef is an excellent doctor, and then Atef goes to the patient's house and he is not focused and asks them for lemon juice, and Atef drinks a lot of lemons, and then the patient's son enters Ali Atef and is shocked by the stitching of his father's wound, and it turns out that Atef sewed the wound in the wrong way, so he kicks him out of the house, and Atef calls Abdul Badi, but he did not, he responds. The next day, Abdul Badi speaks to Helmaya and tells her that he is worried about Atef, and this is because he is not in his room, so Helmaya says that he will return, so do not worry. Atef wakes up and is surprised that he is sleeping in a place designated for raising animals. When he returns to the unit, his clothes are worn out, and he asks Abdul Badi to save him because he is not conscious. When he separates, Atef talks to Hajar and Abdul Badi and tells him what happened. So you ask him how you went to Marzouk. Atef gets confused and says that he was kidnapped, so Hagar warns him and tells him that the matter is serious, so Atef says that he must stay away from problems, so Abdul Badi agrees with his words, and Abdul Badi comforts him and walks, so Atef asks Hajar for permission and says that he will examine the patients, so Hagar warns him and tells him that hallucinogenic pills have side effects and if he can be very sensitive, he reassures her that he is fine and walking. After that, Atef appears crying over the patient who is being examined, and asks Helmaya to take her to her and take care of herself, as the days pass, and shows that Atef is compatible in loneliness. Until the day of receiving the salary, Atef is shocked when he finds the salary at £200, so Atef asks Mr. Medhat, who is in charge of the salaries, did he run out of money, and he comes to him later from his safe, so Medhat replies, this is your salary because of the days of deduction and penalties. Atef gets angry and says if he was a student, he would have taken more than, and I don't know how to complete the rest of it for a month. Medhat suddenly remembers that he is Atef the manager and that he has a percentage of the unit's revenues. He is shocked when he learns that his share has reached £42 after the deductions. At the same time, Alfat goes to Hajar and gives him chocolate, saying that Dr. Samir sent it to her, and Hajar refuses to take it and give it to her friend Allah, and Alfat goes to Dr. Samir, and lies to Samir, and says that Hajar was happy with the chocolate, and Samir gets happy and gives Alfat something. After a while, Atef sees a nurse sitting and crying, so he asks her why she is crying, so she says that she needs a vacation because he is very tired and needs her care. Atef goes to Miss Kauthar and tries to talk about the nurse, but she becomes angry with him and asks him to stay away from the nurses. Atef gets confused and asks him to give the nurse a vacation now that her mother is tired and she needs her. The pressure of work and she needs a vacation, so Kauthar makes fun of him and tells him that they don't work so that they can take a vacation, so she tells Atef that if he wants her to take a vacation, he can take her place at work, so Atef gets scared and says that he is unable to work because he takes someone else's work, so Atef goes. After that, Atef talks to Helmaya and Hajar about Miss Kauthar, so Helmaya insults Miss Kauthar, but Hajar defends her and says that she is a practical and serious woman, and she remains Miss Kauthar. At the same time, she hears them outside the room while they are talking about her. With him in a sweet way, she agrees to give the patient her leave, and then she goes. We see Atef that he will not believe Kauthar's kind treatment of them, and she laughs at him, and then a nurse enters Ali Atef and asks him to save a sick child, and then Atef discovers that the child is sick with a severe illness because he ate honey from Marzouk. Then we see Hajar going to the administration to retrieve a box containing expired medicines. At the same time, she meets Atef and asks her to go with her, and she agrees. Atef leaves and goes to change his clothes. Suddenly, he discovers that Ramadan is in front of his room and tries to steal it. Ramadan knows that today is the day of the arrest, so Atef gets scared and gives him the £242 that he has. He throws Ramadan away and says that if I were a student, I would have taken more than that, so Ramadan asks Atef to pray that God blesses you with the money he took, but he claims that God takes it with his father. After that, Atef goes out with Hagar, and he was going to invite her to get juice, but remember that he has no money, so he says, I remembered that we were late for the appointment and we must go. Hagar says that we are not late, so Atef is confused and he has to invite her. The unit is inside Marzouk's house, and at this time there is a young boy who offers him to show him the place where he will see Marzouk, examining the patients in exchange for juice, and watching Atef Marzouk examining the patient. Hajar's laptop is running, and Hajar says to Atef that she needs to go to hand over the box to the administration, but she discovers that the laptop has been stolen, so Atef and Hagar run to chase the little boy, and they forget Marzouk's medicine box, but they cannot follow the child, so Atef gets angry with the child, and says that this is how he lost his master's thesis. Atef calms her down and says that he knows someone who will help us and bring us the laptop. So Atef and Hajar go to meet Ramadan, and when Ramadan appears, he tries to steal Atef, so Hajar gets scared and tries to push him away, but Atef knows her about Ramadan, and Atef is surprised when she finds out that he is the son of Professor Abdul Badi, and then Atef asks Ramadan to help them find the thief, so he refuses Ramadan because he is an addict, not a thief. Atef is surprised that Ramadan stole him, so Ramadan says that you are the only person who stole you because you did not report me to the police. So Hagar is surprised that Atef is stealing, so he tells her that you steal like me. So Hajar becomes angry with Atef, and she discovers that she forgot the medicine box, and she fights with him, accusing Atef that he is the cause of the problems that happened to her. Suddenly, the thief calls Ali Hajar and asks her for the laptop passport, so Ramadan calls him and tells him to bring the laptop to his house in exchange for £5,000. Abdul Badi is surprised that Atef and Hajar are with Ramadan. He asks Ramadan if a problem occurred because of him. Ramadan is his father and asks them to enter the house. And when they enter the house, the thief arrives at the house and asks Atef from Ramadan to accept the thief, but Ramadan refuses because he is sleeping, so Atef gets nervous and goes to open the door for the thief and enters the thief and shows him that he is not conscious and not concentrating. The thief wants to know the way to the house in order to come and steal them, and Hajar and Atef get the phones and money, but they are surprised that the thief left everything and left because he was not conscious, and Hajar rejoices that she got the laptop back. After that, Atef and Hajar go out together. Atef begins to tell her about his dreams and says that he thought that after graduation he would work in one of the big and beautiful hospitals, and he never imagined that he would work in a small village. Hajar consoles him and says that when she becomes a famous doctor, she will remember those days and laugh. After that, Atef asks her about her master's thesis, and Hajar says that it is about antibiotics and their effect on children, and that her ambition is great and that she wants to help people. And then we see Drive. Samir at Hajar's and he tries to talk to her, but Hajar annoys him and she threatens him that if he does not leave, she will file a complaint about him with the administration, and she will expel him. So Samir gets angry, and then he fights with his patient, and he leaves her and goes. Miss Kauthar goes to Atef and asks him to sign up for a school trip. She will come to the unit. Atef laughs and asks about what the children will see inside the unit. Then a patient enters Ali Atef and complains about Samir. She says that he wants to take an extra amount from the price of the examination ticket. Atef gets scared when he hears Samir's name. He says that he will file a complaint with the administration, so the patient gets frustrated and leaves him, but Atef feels guilty and decides to go with her to the dental clinic. When Atef goes to the clinic, he asks Olaf about the extra money that she takes from the patients, so Olfat gets nervous, and at this time Samir enters them and says that he is the one who asked for the money and challenges Atef because he is weak. Inside the unit, they watch the dialogue, so he takes £50 out of his pocket and asks the patient to go in for the examination, and Atef says that we will talk about it later, so he annoys Samir and kicks him out, and asks him to go to his office, so Atef replies with all his anger, "Yes, I will go because I am the director." Then, Hagar mockingly asks him about his attitude towards Samir, so Atef says that he embarrassed Sammy when I gave him the money. So Hagar gets angry and says that this is how I rewarded him, so Atef replies and says that he did this because he feels the psychological barrier between him and Samir. Because Samir is afraid of revenge on him. We see Samir being angry because of what Atef did to them, so she tries to calm him down and says that he did this because he was afraid of us, so Samir insists on taking revenge on Atef. After that, Atef goes out with Hagar to get her juice, so Hajar asks him about his salary, which has run out, so he says that he took money from his family, and during their conversation, he sees many people gathered around the house, so Atef asks about the reason for the gathering, so a woman replies that his child is tired and that she has convulsions, and Atef gets terrified when he learns that Marzouk is with the child as examined, and Hagar asks Atef to check on him, so Atef tries to escape, so Hagar enters the house and yells at Marzouk, and he says that the child is possessed by demons, so Atef asks Marzouk if she needs help, so he asks him to go, so he agrees immediately, but Hajar refuses and says that the child will die, so Atef tries to talk to Marzouk quietly. He tries to understand that she needs a specialized doctor because she suffers from excess electricity in the brain, and he asks him to examine the child, but Marzouk insists that Atef is going, so Atef shouts to Marzouk and says that you are the one who should walk. At the same time, the child's father comes out of her room and asks Hagar and Atef to go. Hagar comes out, yells at Atef, and says she should have insisted on examining the child, but Atef is not interested in what happened, and tells her that she was beautiful and she is fighting, so Hagar is shocked by his words and upsets him, and says that you are really an irresponsible family, as they say about you, the unit's employees, and then Atef goes to Muhammad and tells him what happened. It happened, but Muhammad did not respond to it. Atef goes to his room, but he couldn't sleep because of what happened, and he keeps remembering Hagar's words, so he decides to open the room that Abdelbadi banned him from, and Atef tries to open it, but he couldn't, and then the electricity goes out, so Atef gets scared and goes down to the unit and calls for the nurses, but no one answers, and suddenly Abdelbadi appears in front of him. Atef hits him with a stick that was in his hand, and when Atef takes Abdelbadi to stitch up the wound, he asks him why you arrived alone in the evening. So Abdelbadi replies that he knew that the electricity was cut off and it will come in the morning and that there are vaccinations in the refrigerator that will spoil because of the power cut, and Atef is not interested and says let it spoil. Abdelbadi is surprised by Atef, and says that the price of the vaccinations is £80,000, and that Atef will pay the price for it if he spoils it, and you will take a penalty. Abdelbadi says that electricity is cut off from the whole country and that they refuse to take vaccinations, the cost of which is £80 million. When Atef asks about the law, Abdelbadi tells him that the vaccinations must be given to anyone close to them, who gives him a guarantee paper to receive the vaccinations. Atef knows that he has only 5 hours left, after which the vaccinations will spoil. Atef and Abdelbadi go out together to deliver the vaccinations, but they find nothing to deliver them. Atef suggests calling the ambulance, which will help them. When Atef calls the ambulance, she refuses to go to them, and he says that it only delivers patients. Atef thinks and calls the ambulance again, and says that he has a serious condition and needs a car. Abdelbadi, whose wound is very small, is surprised by me, so Atef admits that he needs him so that they can transfer the vaccinations to another unit, so Atef refuses and says that he only transfers my illness, so Atef convinces him and says that my future depends on your service, so Wael agrees on the condition that he takes money for the delivery, so Wael agrees to Atef that they are acting sick because of the police, and on the way, Atef appears frustrated, and Abdelbadi tells me that he is frustrated because of what is happening to him from the first time I worked, so Abdelbadi reassures him and tells him that you have the responsibility even though it is a great responsibility. Abdelbadi tells him that he really sees him as a family, and that this is something that is not ugly, because we were all children before, and that he is the family, and he must grow up. At the same time, they reach the unit, so Atef asks Wael to wait, but Wael asks for a larger amount, so he accompanies Atef. When he enters the unit, he is shocked when he learns that the refrigerator in the unit they went to is out of order, and that they put their vaccinations in the unit next to them. It's for they accepted because we have our vaccinations, so he proposes to them another one, but she is away from them. I try for 2 hours, so Atef gets annoyed and leaves. After that, Atef asks Wael to drive them to the unit that is 2 hours away, so Wael refuses, and Atef begs him, so Abdelbadi gets angry with Wael. Atef is afraid that the person will die, but he will be alive. Atef rejoices and asks the patient to ride with him inside the car until they deliver him to the hospital. Then Abdelbadi decides to imprison Wael while the patient is in the ambulance from behind. Until they finally reach the health unit and the vaccinations are successfully delivered in time before they spoil. Atef and Abdelbadi go back to the health unit in the morning, and they meet Helmaya, and Atef tells me that I have a lot of illness waiting for him, so he says that he will change his clothes and come to work. And then we see Samir with Alfat, and she asks him to take a paper from the sealed one that was with Atef and give it to Medhat, an employee of the unit, and it remains written on the paper that Atef wrote to Ms. Kauthar a complaint, a penalty, and a deduction of 5 days from the salary. And when she knows Miss Kauthar, she goes to Atef, she fights with him because of the opponent, and she says that she will leave nursing at his disposal, and Atef does not understand why Kauthar is doing like this, and he asks her what happened, but she did not respond, and she goes. Atef goes to Medhat and asks him about the paper, so Medhat lies to him and says that the director of the department was given to touch Kauthar the opponent and the penalties, so Atef believes him and goes, and then the father of the child who has convulsions appears talking to Dr. Examination of her daughter, but Atef says that it is not his specialty, and asks her to show her to a doctor specializing in brain and nerves, so the mother begs him and says that her father refuses the doctor's intervention, and that my daughter is in a more difficult condition after she took the medicine that Marzouk gave her. He does not want any more problems, but then he feels guilty and agrees. Hagar offers to go with them, and then Atef asks Helmiah to come with them. And then we see Miss Kauthar, and she asks him who gave me the discount and the penalty, so he lies to her and says it is Atef, and asks Madat from Kauthar that the matter is a secret under the pretext that he can get hurt if someone knows, so she gets upset with Kauthar and agrees that it is a secret and goes away, and all this is because of Samir, and he is the one who stamped the papers because he wants to destroy Atef. Atef goes to the child's house with his nipples and Hajar, and when he arrives, he examines the child and gives her medicine, and all this happens without the knowledge of the child's father, because he is outside the house, but suddenly he enters the house. Arad, I was just doing my job, so the father of the child gets confused, so he gives him Atef his prescription and asks him to bring it to the child if you want to heal her, and he leaves him and goes. And the police actually arrive at Marzouk's house and accuse him of examining the sickness without a license. Marzouk lies and says that these people came to visit him and not to check up. Ali Marzouk and they go, so Marzouk gets angry about what happened and knows that the one who reported him to the police is Atef. We see Samir while he is with Marzouk, and we learn after that they have a relationship with each other. Marzouk asks Samir to help him take revenge on Atef, so Samir says that Midar is already planning to expel him from the unit. On the second day, Atef wakes up and wears robes like the people of the village, and he is happy. He walks in the village, and then he meets Abdul Badi, and they go together to the unit, but they are shocked when he first finds chaos in front of the unit. As she told him, he goes to her office to talk to her, but she was not interested, so Atef gets angry and deducts 2 days penalty for her, so Kauthar is shocked, but she decides not to do anything. Atef goes to his office, but he finds the nurses gathered and selling clothes, so Atef expels them and shouts at them, and suddenly the supervisory department calls the unit and learns from Abdul Badi that the management comes to the unit from time to time to inspect everything inside the unit, and that the administration only comes if someone submits a complaint in the unit, and we know that Samir is the one who planned all this and that he lied to the administration and told them that he was the director of the unit and sent a request sealed with Atef's stamp that they are delaying an inspection of the unit, and because of that the administration suspected that something was happening inside the unit, and that is why she came for the inspection. And Atef goes to meet the head of the administration and tries to explain to her what happened, and she asks the head of the administration, one of the employees present with her, searches the unit. The head of the administration is shocked by the negligence inside the unit. She enters the vaccination room and finds grapes inside the refrigerator. The nurses also quarrel with the head of the administration. Atef tries to stop them, but he fails. At the same time, Samir examines a patient and gets angry with her, but when the head of the administration enters, he tells Samir to treat the patient with kindness, and then the head of the administration enters his office and closes the door in Atef's face, and then Hajar goes to Kauthar trying to understand that Atef is not the one who wrote the letter. There is a deduction for you, and something is definitely wrong, but Kauthar will not believe her, and she says that she has been trying to work all her life without mistake, so as not to take deductions and penalties, and this affects the pension. Kauthar refuses to help Atef and save what is happening. And the head of the administration graduated from the unit, and she was annoyed, and Atef asked her for another chance, because he was a fresh graduate, and if it was difficult for him to be a manager alone, and he was a recent graduate, but the head was not convinced, and she told him that he would go to investigate because of what I saw inside the unit. At the same time, people from the country enter, complaining that Atef is describing them wrong, expired medicine. He also takes the money from the unit's donations to him, and they give him the paper stamped with Atef's stamp, which proves that. Atef denies all of this, so she asks the head of the administration, Hajar, about the medicine. Hajar knows that it is the same expired medicine that they lost with Marzouk, but the head of the administration, Hajar, turns to the investigation, but Atef defends. And he tells her that this is his fault because he is the reason for the loss of medicine in the street, but the boss will not be convinced of his words by turning him into an investigation. She will also stop Atef from work permanently, and she will interrogate him personally, ensuring that he will be arrested for everything he did, and Atef will be upset and unable to speak, and when his boss is gone. The administration goes to Abdelbadi and begs her to forgive Atef because he is still young, but she will not care about his words and gets angry with him and asks him to go. And then Atef is surprised when Marzouk appears and says that the doctor who was examining your children is a thief, and Atef discovers that the whole country is against him. She justifies her position, but Atef shuts her up and says that the matter is bigger than them. Atef goes to his office and becomes frustrated and sad. Suddenly, a young child enters and throws a piece of paper at him. Atef is shocked when he finds Kauthar's reward and is sealed with his office seal. And he shouts at the child to find out where he got the paper from, so Atef goes to Midhat and asks him about the reason for hiding Kauthar's penalty from me, so he denies Midhat, but Atef threatens him and tells him that he will beat him if he does not speak, so Midhat gets scared and says that Samir is the one who asked me to do that. So Atef goes to Samir, he meets Alfat, and he asks her about Samir, so she says that he went out to buy cigarettes, and Atef goes to meet Samir at the same time. He meets Hajar and asks her for the self-defense spray that she owns, and he takes it. Samir's office, then he ties Samir to the chair, and Samir stops him and orders him to undo it. Atef asks him about the papers that he has sealed, but Samir denies that. He bought it and stamped many blank papers, and then asked him to reseal it, so Samir got angry at Alfat and disturbed her. So Atef remembers when he found the seal at the entrance of the unit on the day of the fire, and then Hajar reprimands him from Atef, focusing and asking him about the rest of the sealed papers. When we get married, Samir gets scared and says that the papers are in Alfat's desk drawer, so Alfat gets shocked and tells us that Samir hid the papers in her desk drawer, and she confesses to everything Samir did, and she tells me Atef that Samir forged his signature and also reported you to the administrative control, so Atef asks him why he accused him in the donations case. Atef gets upset and says to Samir, I have never hurt you, and Samir says that he has nothing to do with the issue of donations, and you can ask Helmaya, so Atef gets shocked when he learns that Helmaya has a relationship with Marzouk, and that Helmaya was telling Marzouk everything that happens inside the unit, and we know that Samir and Marzouk were stealing Viagra, and he used to put it in honey and sell it to patients as medicine. Helmaya used to steal the doctor's diagnosis of patients and send them to Marzouk, and that Helmaya was the one who informed Marzouk that Atef had reported him to the police, so Marzouk would take the medicines and hide them. Even if the police came, they would not find anything, in order to extinguish the fire. After that, Helmaya tries to sympathize with Dr. Atef, but he refuses to listen to her, and Atef talks to Kauthar and Hajar so that they can be witnesses to what happened, and that he will hand over the papers to the administration to finish the case he was accused of at the same time. Samir talks and tries to prevent Atef from informing the police, so Atef says that he was mocking him and that the syringe was empty, and there was nothing in it, and he insulted him. And he leaves him and goes. And then Atef comes out of Samir's office, and Hagar tells him that she won't believe him. His dream was a spy, so he said, Atef, dreaming is not the problem. The problem is in the people of the country. They believe in someone like Marzouk. Hajar tries to convince Atef to stay in the unit, but Atef refuses and says, to stay. The unit manager answers that I have the responsibility and goes. In the evening, Atef goes to collect the bag, and he is going to meet Kauthar and Hajar, and Abdelbadi is waiting for him. Atef asks about the time of the arrival of the new manager, so Kauthar says that he will arrive soon, so she asks Atef to go so that he will not be late. Al-Badi, and asks him, will you come back again? He replies, yes, I will come to visit them, and then he asks. Abdelbadi tells him not to cook pizza again, so he insults you all, and Hajar is affected while saying goodbye to Atef, and he leaves after her. Then we see a taxi on the road with the new doctor in it, and we see the car in which Marzouk is riding, and suddenly the two cars get into each other and cause an accident. At the same time, Atef is in the car, returning to Cairo, and he hears about the accident from the driver, so Atef decides to go back to the unit and help the injured, and asks the nurses to stay with the patients, and expels the people out of the unit, and Atef is surprised when he finds Marzouk among the injured, and Atef decides to save him, and it appears that Marzouk is unable. I'm on the verge of dying, but Atef insists on saving him, and he stays in his aid until he succeeds, and Marzouk wakes up, and then the ambulance calls, and she is surprised that only one doctor saved all the injured, and then Atef sees Marzouk inside the ambulance and goes to talk to him, but he He is surprised when people push him away to reassure him about Marzouk, and people think that Marzouk lived. Because of his miracles, Atef laughs and leaves. After a while, we see Atef talking to Muhammad and telling him his latest news. We know that Atef remained the director of the unit, and that the supervision gave him a discount for 2 days. Because of that, he will stay for 2 years in the unit, but it appears that he is happy and that he will get used to the life of the village, and that Hajar and Atef will reconcile. And they show their admiration for each other, and Atef tells Muhammad that he is really trying to be a manager, even if he himself conquers evil and becomes a real hero, but it did not happen, and we know that Marzouk is still working and that people are still going to him. And he thanks Atef Muhammad because he has been listening to him all the time that has passed, and he says that something is still taking place. He remains preoccupied with his thoughts, so Atef is surprised when Muhammad replies to him and asks him about what is preoccupying his thinking, and then we see Atef opening the locked room that Abdul Badi banned him from, and the first season of the final series. It's the end. If you like the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.